My body of work project is all about clowns. A career and a concept that I like almost entirely just for the visual aspect. I find clowns to be incredibly aesthetically pleasing, and that has resulted in a lot of my research for this project being entirely visual. For this project, I looked at the artist Holly Gardner, who goes by Slow Caution on Instagram. I've liked this person's work for a long while now. Even before I started following them, I saw their work pop up around the internet every now and again. Their work is incredibly consistent. They're essentially a doll maker, and all of these dolls are clowns. Little, very exaggerated, very character design orientated clowns, sometimes with things like plague doctor masks and heavily nature inspired things thrown in there, but it's a lot of clowns. In the end, looking at their work just made me want to do 3D work, which I did. A large chunk of my project ended up being 3D. Another artist I looked at for this project was Pippa Toole, an artist who I've known of and followed for a long time. And one of the reasons why I looked at her work for this particular project was mainly just because of how she does character portraits. While they're all of different characters, different people, different concepts, they all have very similar attributes to them that keep her work looking very consistent. I wanted to keep a similar consistency in my own work, as I was going to be drawing the same concept over and over again, which was a clown. Like I said before, a very large part of my appreciation for clowns comes from the love for the aesthetic side of it, which meant that I did spend a chunk of this project collecting images, photography, costumes that I thought were visually very interesting. This portion of my research included a lot of images that one may think of immediately when thinking about clowns and clown performance. So a lot of vintage photography from the early 1900s, a lot of theatre magazines again from the early 1900s, and also a lot of paintings by Francis Xavier Leyendecker. This portion of my research also included a dive into what the internet calls clowncore. This is essentially a very colourful, very childish aesthetic that is based around the idea of like a circus clown. So a very cartoony, very colourful kind of clown that often appears to be quite cute and charming. To look into this aesthetic, I created a board on Pinterest where I just saved everything that anybody was relating to clowncore, and I also looked on TikTok and YouTube for anybody who was posting any kind of content based around this aesthetic. This also stemmed into a bit of research and a bit of looking into of Harajuku fashion, just because that is also very over the top, very colourful and very cartoony, and it seems as though it kind of integrates on the internet with clowncore. Looking at these aesthetics was incredibly helpful because they are incredibly child-friendly aesthetics that are visually appealing and interesting, and it made me want to make content for children for this project. This research and decision came very early on in the project, which meant that my project throughout has a direction, which is to make content for children. Which led me to thinking about my own childhood and whatever interactions with clowns I may have had. In the end, I looked up some old Mr. Blobby and Mr. Tumble videos, two shows that I used to absolutely adore as a child. Mr. Tumble was educational in the emotional sense, where it would talk about like thoughts and feelings. It also had a focus on the main character Mr. Tumble using sign language, so then it was a very accessible program for deaf and hard of hearing children. Mr. Blobby, on the other hand, was essentially just a fever dream in a big rubber suit. It was brilliant, and I absolutely adored it. Both shows are very colourful and cartoony and appeal to children in so many ways, just in very different ways. Both of these shows had the kind of personality that I wanted to employ in my own work, where it is hyper colourful, really quite silly, and made for a modern child audience.